What's up everyone, it's ENDYMION, and the fallout of episode 3 of Star Wars The Acolyte is currently ravaging the internet like an inferno. Everyone is mad, others love it, and the entire situation is easily going to be a hot topic of discussion for the foreseeable future. Access Media Shills are also now running damage control for Disney and Acolyte creator Leslie Headland. And none of this is going over very well with the fanbase at all. I actually wanted to start with IGN, who recently released an article that's titled, "How the Acolyte Episode 3 Continues the Most Important Theme of The Last Jedi." IGN spends an entire article trying to convince the reader that the Jedi are flawed, and they must be replaced by a new order with new tenets and rules. And that concepts like light and dark side should basically be abolished because they don't serve anyone in this new age. They also spend the entire article glazing all over Disney's knob, saying The Last Jedi and Acolyte are important pieces to Star Wars' lore when the very projects IGN defends here are the reasons why the IP are in such dire straits to begin with. Let me be very clear, The Last Jedi is not a good movie, nor is it a good Star Wars film either. It was the cinematic equivalent of explosive diarrhea that completely emptied its bowels of Star Wars and left nothing that could conceivably work for a third film. We know this is true because J.J. Abrams spent the last film in the trilogy speedrunning and fixing all the problems Rian Johnson left Abrams to deal with following his Last Jedi film. Snoke was dead, Kylo Ren was suddenly Supreme Leader, even though his journey in the previous film heavily hinted that he was not all in on the dark side. And the core problem Rian Johnson and now Leslie Headland seems to be driving as the focal point of their series is that the Force is for everyone and not just for the Jedi or the Sith. I noticed one place of criticism many of these Access Media shills kept saying in their articles is that the Jedis are actually the oppressors. And the Acolyte's third episode paints the picture attempting to convince the viewer that this is the case. The reason being is simply because the Jedi will feel a powerful young Force user, then they'll enter a residence without consent and essentially pull the Force-sensitive child from their support structure. This is considered oppressive and cult-like, which it is to a degree, but I also saw it as something that needed to happen. You know, to ensure that not all hell just breaks loose, let me explain myself. You see, I always looked at the Jedi Council in a similar fashion to Marvel's X-Men. What I mean by that is, like the Jedi, when the X-Men discover a new powerful mutant that is born, Charles Xavier usually personally greets the mutant and offers them guidance and support within the X-Men's mansion. In a similar vein, these Access shills could look at what Xavier does and think, well, the X-Men are oppressors, because they are pulling innocent kids from their families, which sure, you could see it that way, I guess. But we are kind of missing the fact that the mutant could be little Timmy boy who can shoot molten lava from his hands. And I doubt his dad, who works in an office, and his mom, who's a teacher, knows anything about helping their kid not turn their house into barbecue. The reason why the X-Men, like the Jedi, seek out these powerful children is to protect them and their family alongside the rest of Earth, or the galaxy in Star Wars' case. Leaving a massively powerful Force user to the teachings and devices of people who don't understand the dangers of such a power is a recipe for destruction. I can't believe I need to explain this, but we know that the Force is amplified and changes based on the emotional state of the user. Feed too much into negative emotions, you become corrupted by it and eventually become a Sith. If a child like Anakin, or May and Osha in Acolyte's case, are considered massively powerful Force users, they absolutely need to be trained in order to understand what exactly they've been born into. This is not about abducting kids to fill ranks, although that is kind of what woke weirdos do now that I'm saying it, but the Jedi, like the X-Men, understand that if someone out there is capable of incredible power, they need to understand what that power is in the first place. It's like what Uncle Ben says to Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. What Rian Johnson, Leslie Headland, and the other shills are trying to say is we don't want the responsibility and we want to be left with all the power so we can do as we see fit. Which honestly perfectly encapsulates the mentality and framework of places like Hollywood, an industry ran and filled with people who have no concept of what normal, ordinary life and problems are. They don't care that people live paycheck to paycheck, and they will look you dead in the eyes and ask you things like, "What do you mean you've never been on a yacht before?" Hollywood, as they have been exposed time and again, have learned is that they are not the kind of people who should be telling the rest of the world how to live or act. Because they are like the very Jedi and Sith Disney is trying to pull down and rip apart. Powerful individuals who have never been told no and don't ask for consent, they just take and peer down from their castles at the ordinary individuals. Like me or yourself, because we don't live in million-dollar mansions starring in movies like they do. The very concept of Jedi and Sith and the Force needing balance and care is foreign to Hollywood in places like Disney. How can you expect a company that's filled with people who have no care when it comes to what they do with their power in the first place? To them, the Jedi are nothing more than annoying janitors that come into their offices to clean their messes because they can't be bothered to do it themselves. They hate the idea of someone having immense power needing to rein it in and learn how to use it. Because they live their whole lives splurging in every sense of the word, and they have no concept of reining it in or anything like that. This is why Star Wars is fundamentally being reduced, remixed, and destroyed by people like Disney, because they don't believe in the tenets that George Lucas created for this galaxy far, far away. To them, it's a vehicle for messaging, propaganda, and to be used to enforce their own beliefs. Why do you think so much media today is full of LGBTQ+ representation, woke nonsense, and more? Because that's what California is like, which is where these Hollywood types live. To them, everything is painfully colorful, glitzy, and glamorous, and people just do whatever they want with whomever they want. They want media to represent their way of life, not realizing that the media they're creating to be sold to an audience cannot connect to them because that's not how they live or perceive it. It's the same with video games. Many of them are being made in these liberal echo bubbles, failing to realize they made something for themselves and not the people who are meant to buy it. Disney has killed Star Wars because they don't care to understand that they are the jealous, vindicative, powerful Force users. They are like May in this story. They don't care about what the Jedi are telling them because it infringes on their way of life, and this is confirmed in the quote that keeps getting said in every trailer for the Acolyte as well. This isn't about good or bad, this is about power and who is allowed to use it. The Acolyte pushes the idea that the Jedi are an oppressive force trying to hoard all the power of the Force for themselves so no one else can use it. And I can see how they may perceive it that way, but I never actually looked at it like that myself. For me, the Jedi are there to ensure the immense potential of the Force is not abused in order to harm the galaxy. And we saw what happened to a galaxy once the Jedi were but effectively all erased from existence, didn't we? Years of peace as the Republic reigned, only for chaos, genocide, and political wildfires to spread quite literally overnight as soon as the Jedi Council was absolved. The very existence of someone like Emperor Palpatine and even Darth Vader are proof alone that what the Jedi were doing all along was for the common good of the galaxy. The Jedi didn't rule with an iron fist during their reign like the Empire did. Cultures were still allowed to thrive. Peace was always the utmost important principle to uplift and maintain. Without the Jedi, the Force was left to be used by those who were able to tap into that power, and nobody was there to tell them why they couldn't use it the way they wanted to. The Acolyte is actually making the case that what happened to the Jedi and the eventual devastation of the Republic and the death of billions is somehow a good thing. Because after all, the Jedi are bad, right? They were hoarding the power of the Force, even though no new wars began and the galaxy was at peace for the most part. No, of course that's horrible. Instead, it's much better that literal space Yahtzees in stormtrooper armor are instead rounding people up and sending them off to camps. And let's not forget using a giant space station called the Death Star of all things to blow up entire planets that were full of billions of people like Alderaan. How can you look at the Jedi and believe that they were always the bad guys? The only people who could reasonably look at what they were doing and say it was bad would be the actual bad guys themselves, which again is Disney in this regard, not the fan base or what George Lucas made prior. Yes, the Jedi were flawed, as anything alive is, but the alternative to their ways is complete utter pandemonium on a galactic scale. Allowing billions of potential Force users to abuse the Force to their benefit all because they think being trained is somehow oppressive is classic Hollywood to a T. Imagine if Xavier and the X-Men never existed. The Earth in Marvel Comics, it would be dead and gone long ago. Imagine if Jean Grey got taken over by the Phoenix and she had no one to turn to, nobody to help her. What good could anyone do to stop her? Or if Franklin Richards, who can warp reality with a single thought, was just left alone with no proper training. Everything in the Marvel Universe would be cooked, dude. The new meta Disney is pushing is basically a child being placed in the seat of a forklift, and then when someone says, "Hey, do you know how to operate that forklift? Have you taken any courses to understand what this vehicle is capable of?" And then the kid just turns around and yells, "Shut up, bigot, this forklift is for everyone to use how they see fit." Remember that the Sith are the ones who only deal in absolutes, and that's what Disney and the people they've hired to ruin Star Wars seem to be doing instead of what George Lucas intended originally. None of this is a good idea. It ruins the fundamental concepts of Star Wars for absolutely no reason. It's like if Marvel just threw away the concepts of hero and villain and just went, they're just super they-thems now. There needs to be rules and morality in place when it comes to franchises and concepts. Otherwise, it's just absolute mayhem. It's like the real world. Without laws, society would be a hellscape. What we're seeing is the corruption of an idea being hijacked far beyond any other franchise or IP to such a disrespectful degree it no longer resembles what it originated from anymore. This single shot of Anastasia with her witches, for example, if you didn't know the shot was from the Acolyte, you'd think it was some generic fantasy show. Star Wars is losing its identity. It's losing what makes it beloved because the people who own it now don't care about what makes it special to begin with. It was originally too masculine, too family-oriented, too traditional, so like anything else in this world that holds these tenets, they are now tearing it down. There's this article too from that Park Place titled "Access Media Blames Fans for Ruining Star Wars, Not the People at Lucasfilm Pushing Queer Feminist Agendas." This article brings up another article that I talked about in my previous video, the one from Inverse where they said the fans are the problem and not Disney. How they believe the fandom is littered with racist, misogynistic fans who hate people of color. Yet we know this isn't true because, for example, Andor exists, which also had female characters, and I don't see anyone complaining about those ones at all. Could it be because people didn't watch it as much as other shows? Maybe, but the Acolyte is currently doing about just as bad or worse than Andor. So this is not really a gotcha for them either. The truth is, you can have female characters, even diverse ones. But the problem here is you're making their existence as diverse characters matter more than what they actually bring as a living being to that story or universe. We don't care if Mother Anastasia is black or if May is half black. If the characters suck, they could look as cool as Darth Maul. It wouldn't make a difference. They're so hell-bent on pushing identity politics, they've forgotten that characters can't live and breathe off appearance alone. Look at Captain Phasma. She is peak Disney character to a T. Looks cool, but does, says, and accomplishes absolutely nothing. And really only exists to push the idea of a female captain in Star Wars and sell toys. That's really it. And when you read interviews from George Lucas, it's depressing. Here's what he said recently at the Cannes Film Festival, and I quote, "I was the one who really knew what Star Wars was, who actually knew this world because there's a lot to it. The Force, for example. Nobody understood the Force. When they started other ones after I sold the company, a lot of the ideas that were in the original sort of got lost, but that's the way it is. You give it up. You give it up. I kind of lost control of Star Wars, so it's going off in a different path than what I intended, but the first 6 Star Wars films are very much mine and my philosophy. And I think that philosophy sort of goes beyond any particular time because it's based on history, it's based on philosophy, it's based on a lot of things." End quote. And that's what makes those original films timeless. They are evergreen in that sense. You could watch the Star Wars trilogy when they came out, now, or 100 years from now, and you could still learn something from it that you could apply to the world that you live in anyways. There is nothing positive or uplifting or deep to learn or teach when it comes to what Disney has pushed here. All we learn from everything Disney makes with Star Wars is that the past doesn't matter, reject your family and traditional values, and tear down any of the laws or tenets that brought balance to your life. It's like a weird propaganda, almost Orwellian cocktail of a mixed message to send to fans, especially young ones. When you watch those original Lucasfilms, you feel hope, you feel wonder, you feel peace, but these new things, you just feel emptiness and apathy. What Disney has created is no longer a galaxy far, far away, but a shell of what it once was. I don't recognize the Star Wars I grew up with anymore, and I don't mean because they're pushing women constantly in it, but also that too. I mean, I don't recognize it in the sense that the Force is no longer the primary source of power, the thread is, which is stupid. Anakin is no longer the chosen one, but simply someone made in a way that can be replicated. All of these ideas and stories and concepts that originated from the mind of a man who rose up as an independent filmmaker and just showed Hollywood that you can stand on your own 2 feet, has had his creation taken from him and turned into a lesbian Force is female disaster. Even Star Wars Theory recently tweeted what this episode has done just makes Star Wars even more terrible now. Here's what he said via Twitter. Palpatine had such a hard time cloning Force sensitives until Moff Gideon with all of his power, knowledge of the Force, and his unlimited resources, as well as the inability to create life, and Force-sensitive life, mind you, which is even more impossible. The Sith, Jedi, Mother Talzin, witches of Dathomir, Darth Plagueis, Anakin, and the Empire couldn't do it. Random witches pulling a couple threads of the Force equal to conceive 2 Force-sensitive children. So powerful that the Jedi sends and track them down across the galaxy. At what point do we just say, what the hell? And he's right. How the hell do these random witches have the means to create something that literally nobody else has been capable of doing themselves? If Palpatine couldn't do it, or Darth Plagueis, but Anastasia did, yet whatever she has done clearly was lost to time, because obviously Palpatine and such couldn't replicate it because we know they don't in the future, none of it makes any sense. They just created 2 powerful Force-sensitive children because they could apparently. Of course, the whole show isn't out yet. But it's starting to look like, to me anyways, that the Acolyte might end up being the most important Disney Star Wars project yet. But for all the wrong reasons, of course, because whatever explanation Disney ends up using as the reason as to how Anastasia made Maya and Osha, the end result is going to be that this would mean Anastasia technically is the most powerful and proficient Force user the galaxy has ever known, because she was able to succeed where literally nobody else could with nowhere near the same amount of resources or anything else. Not to mention the witches apparently use the Force yet are not succumbing to either the light or dark sides of the Force when they use it. So they somehow exist in this gray Jedi-esque realm of power where they are able to pretty much use powers that only one side of the Force is able to do if they completely give themselves into it. For example, remember when Palpatine told Anakin in Revenge that if Anakin explores the dark side, he could learn how to bring people back from the dead. And Anakin obviously goes into the dark side in an effort to save Padme. We also see Rey apparently get brought back to life by Kylo Ren and Rise doing the exact same thing, which either means Palpatine was lying and bringing people back from the dead is an inherently light side Force power only, or both sides of the Force can do the exact same things down to the same abilities. Meaning the only difference between joining either side is quite literally down to if you either want a blue or red lightsaber, which is just lame as hell. But we know Palpatine just somehow returned after all. Disney never explains how because they know any explanation they give will be stupid as well. But fans attempted to make sense of this revelation, assuming the dark side was capable of cheating death essentially. But again, all of this doesn't matter anymore anyways because random witch lady can just convulse, thrust her hands around and sing with her lesbian sisters, and voila, 2 fresh super Force sensitive children coming right up. Basically, nothing that's happening here makes any sense, and clearly despite the massive backlash response, it's not resulting in any actual earnings for Disney either. Since according to Luminate, which is an analyst group that collects data on streaming shows and so on, the Acolyte's first 2 episodes were able to gain 210 million minutes watched combined when they premiered. Which may sound like a lot, but when you compare it to, well, anything else, it's actually very abysmal. Considering if we compare the 2-episode premiere of Acolyte to Ahsoka, that show was able to garner 829 million minutes watched compared to Acolyte's 210. Almost 4 times the amount of people watched Ahsoka over Acolyte is what I'm saying here in their debuts. And to show you how bad the apathy has come into Star Wars, even Mandalorian Season 3's opening, which was only 1 episode by the way, was able to bring in 823 million minutes watched. So more people watched Mando's opener of the weakest season of that series than Acolyte, again by around 4 times the amount. So if any shill tries to twist the narrative and tell you Star Wars is back baby or whatever, I just want you to know it's never been more worse than now for both Star Wars as a brand and being a fan of the franchise too. IGN, alongside their other news websites, are all running damage control for the pro-feminist series, and it's not working, friends. We are currently witnessing the new world agenda Disney has been laying for years when it comes to Star Wars coming to fruition. A future where Anakin is not the chosen one, the Force doesn't matter anymore, and Star Wars is officially going forward a female-focused brand primarily, even though Kathleen Kennedy recently admitted that despite their efforts, the brand is still heavily male-dominated regardless. The Acolyte is about power and who is allowed to use it, and as we can see, when Disney is allowed to abuse this very same power without control, it has led to nothing but a new dark age for a series that was once started with a new hope. Star Wars is not only dead, it is being drowned in the apathy of millions of fans by a power-hungry company that is hell-bent on ruining everything we love. And it must end. Thank you for watching, subscribe, share, and like the video, and thanks to my patrons as well. I'll keep you updated on all of this, but let me know what you think as always in the comments too. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.